mutual respect and mutual dignity, then we can get on to the next task of learning how to love each other. That, to me, is the proper order. Nobody expected the African National Congress to love white people until they won that right of one person, one vote. The democratic rights of the people of South Africa first have to be restored before we get on to maybe the more difficult challenge, but it's still in sequence the second step of learning to love each other.
Good evening, Mr. Finkelstein. It was a great lecture, and I have a question about the Strip of Gaza specifically. As you said, it is surrounded by wall, the air is closed, the sea is closed, the borders are closed. So I imagine the people living there do not have a lot of opportunities to exploit. So do you think that if there was no wall, or if the borders were open, or if the people could travel freely, that this could be the solution for the Strip of Gaza? I mean, they could join international trade or exploit tourism. There are beautiful beaches. Do you think that the abolishment of this restraint could be the solution, or is that too naive? Thank you.
Well, there are separate questions. Of course, the blockade, as we speak now, the blockade of Gaza is brutal and it's inhuman. And that is a simple fact. Amnesty International has called that blockade a flagrant violation of international law, which means a war crime. And the Goldstone report called it a possible crime against humanity. That blockade is so cruel, so vicious. The denial of Palestinians, even things like tea bags, paper for children's textbooks, the denial after destroying 6,000 homes were razed from the ground, the denial of the Palestinians the right, more than a year later, to rebuild their homes. No cement is allowed in. Glass is not allowed in. Window panes can't be repaired. During a harsh winter, they were forced to live in tents, all the people who were made homeless. And that continues right now as we speak. And that is just unacceptable. It's inhuman what's being done to those people. That's the first point. So of course, lifting the blockade is important. But let's not play this game of turning Palestine into a salami. And you're going to slice off a piece, Gaza, and say, go make a country out of it. Palestine is not a salami. It's a country. It has its constituent parts, the West Bank and Gaza. And Israel has no right to divide it up in pieces as it chooses and give back this piece and take that piece. What country in the world would accept that? Oh, we'll give you independence in New York, but we're going to keep Detroit and Chicago. Would any American accept that?
Hell no.
This is becoming ridiculous, the way you're treating these people. A minimum of human dignity. That's all they're asking. And now you want to play this game of we'll give you a slice here and a slice there. That's just unacceptable. It's repellent what's being done to those people. And it's a crying shame. It is a crying shame that your country, which lived under a brutal occupation, can't understand what's wrong with what's going on there. That's really pitiful.
guess that would be a good final remark, but unfortunately I have another question. May I ask you to address another legal issue? What was the status of the currently occupied territories of the West Bank, East Jerusalem, and Gaza Strip before June 1967? You didn't mention that. We know that the Strip of Gaza, it belonged to Egypt. West Bank of Jordan belonged to Jordan. So there was no Palestinian claim at the time for these territories. So is the 1947 UN partition plan applicable here, or how would you actually answer this legal question?
Well, in 1947, when the UN created both a state of an Arab state and a Jewish state, they didn't give it names at the time. They created an Arab state and a Jewish state. The Israeli state came into being. The Arab state did not come into being. At the end of the war, Jordan annexed the West Bank. The only countries in the world that recognized Jordan's annexation of the West Bank were the United Kingdom and Pakistan. Egypt occupied the Gaza Strip, but it did not officially and never officially annex the Gaza Strip. The fact is that Israel, by the end of the 1948 war, although the partition plan called for Israel to occupy 56% of Palestine, by the end of the war, they occupied 80% of Palestine. The only parts they didn't occupy were the West Bank and Gaza. And so you have a curious irony. The only case I know of in the modern world where the United Nations accepted the principle of acquiring territory by war was when the UN accepted that Israel's border is now 80% of Palestine, and that only 20%, the West Bank and Gaza, will be the homeland and the state of the Palestinian people.
I'm afraid we ran out of time, so let's take the...
Can we prolong it a little bit? I think they won't throw us out.
Yeah, I'm happy to stay because I miss my other talk.
Yeah.
Good evening. Just a good question, simple one. You have been explaining all the time about the violations that have been all for the last 50 years practiced by Israel. And we feel like, or at the moment, my question to you, what actually at the current time would force Israel to come down to the international law and really give the Palestinians, after all those 50 bloody years, their own right? Thank you.
That's a good question, and now I'm going to answer you as a very devout atheist. And my answer is, God helps those who help themselves. You have to act. You have to do something. That's why a little group called Friends of Palestine formed in the Czech Republic. The Zionist movement, you have to give them credit because they understood that legal statements on their own are meaningless. You have to make them political forces.